to deceive. In other words, lying and acting dishonestly can set off a chain reaction of issues that eventually go out of control. Good evening, St. Lucia, and welcome to another RoundTable. And tonight, I ask that you hold on to your hats, grab a tall glass of water, because the information which we are about to discuss will be a tough pill to swallow. Joining me this evening are no strangers to the RoundTable, and they are the political leader of the United Workers' Party and leader of the opposition, and his capable Deputy Senator Dominic Fedee. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening, Laura. Good to be here.
Over the weekend, we inadvertently learned of some shocking truth. Now, we've been talking about CIP for the longest while, and the leader of opposition has been sounding the clarion call that something is wrong. And perhaps we have not been paying much attention, but certainly, as we say in our local color, mouth open and story jump out. And we've learned some shocking things, and we're going to discuss them this evening. There is a scandal brewing. There's a scandal brewing, and it's almost as if our people cannot trust our government, because if we cannot trust the messenger, why should we trust the message that you are spewing? Over the weekend, we learned about 11,000 of our passports are up for grabs. We learned that the reason for not signing this touted MOA is because we want to grandfather those passports. So tell us about it. First, let us set the foundation. Let us explain in the most basic and simplest terms that the ordinary man on the library bus stop can understand. What is the CIP and how does it affect us in St. Lucia?
Well, thank you very much, Laura.
There's an old saying that says, where there's smoke, there's fire. So the first signs of smoke that we saw in the CIP program currently was the suspension of Dominica's visa-free access to the UK, and then quickly followed by Ireland. We saw that the British did an audit of a couple of the CIP programs, St. Kitts and Dominica in particular. The report showed that St. Kitts had sold over 45,000 passports, and that Dominica had sold close to 34,000 passports. And there were questions raised as to where the money had gone and how the program was being managed and the secrecy that was involved in it. We then saw that the EU came out with a mandate that the OECS countries create an MOU, a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement that would harmonize background checks and harmonize the pricing. Because one of the things that the report of the UK and some of the other independent agencies unveiled is that there was a significant amount of discounting that was taking place in the industry. Discounting means that if the government had approved it to be 100,000, it was being sold for less than 100,000. And you have to ask yourself, how does that happen? It can only happen if there is collusion with the government or the government agencies or the actors that are acting on behalf of the government. So there was plenty of things that were indicating to us that there's a problem and that the rest of the world had basically gotten to the point of frustration, because the exposure for the Canadians and the exposure for the British and the exposure for the Europeans is that persons could potentially obtain citizenship in our countries, use the favored status that we have, meaning St. Lucians currently can go to the UK without a visa, they can go to Europe without a visa, we can go to Martinique and Guadeloupe without a visa. We now can apply for a visa online to Canada. So once you're a St. Lucian and you already have had a US visa, you can apply online without having to go to Trinidad and apply for a visa. those countries now are increasingly more and more alarm bells that persons may be coming through our borders, using our access to our passports, and in doing that could go undercover into their markets. Now, we saw last week that 2 Chinese individuals, one in the States and one in the UK, were arrested, right, on money laundering and on fraud. And the one thing that both of them had in common is both of them had obtained Citizen passports. And that when they did the audit of those individuals, they used false documentation to get those passports. Now, that's not the first time. The first time that the EU and the UK expressed alarm bells, and Canada, and that's what was the result of it, was when a person who has gotten St. Kitts citizenship and was also given diplomatic status, right, for St. Kitts, was arrested in Canada for fraud. And that is what triggered, most experts believe, that that's what triggered the Canadians changing the visa access. So there has been a lot of smoke. The reason why the opposition cares about this is that when we were in government and we were running the CIP program, it was always to make sure that we never did anything to jeopardize that visa-free access. I would have rather not do it. If it even came remotely close and I was backed up by my cabinet, everybody was very concerned. So we have a situation where the European Parliament is going to be presented with a motion. So the European Parliament, Laura, acts exactly like how our government works. There is an executive, which is cabinet, and then you have the Parliament itself. The executive of the European Secretariat have presented a motion to the Parliament, which is going to go to debate and vote in June, which says they want Parliament to give the executive the authority that any country that's involved in CIP, that the executive can take the unilateral action of suspending or terminating their visa-free access to Europe. So that means it can happen immediately.
So, in other words, St. Kitts,
Anywhere in the world.
Dominica, anywhere that has
Anywhere
a
in the
CIP.
world that has CIP, the bill that's going to go to debate in June is saying that the executive has the authority, if they believe that there is a security threat to Europe, to suspend or terminate that visa, which means it's quick. Because the executive doesn't have to wait for a parliamentary approval for those things. It's giving them that authority.
Okay.
So when you read what's going on, clearly the Europeans had told the OECS countries, look, this is what's going to happen. We want you to make sure you sign the MOA, making it effective of June, so by the time we get the authority, we don't have reason to suspend your visas.
Now, before you continue, let's talk a little bit about the MOA. What is contained within that MOA? What is it that these islands, these countries, are being asked to sign off on in order for them to not be affected or to be looked favorably upon? Dominic, you want, Senator?
So some of the provisions in the MOA would include things like a commonality. The first thing is the 200,000 minimum price. That is the most important thing. Due diligence, to set up an entity or a standard of harmonizing the due diligence process of all of the OECS countries. Some countries have actually violated some of the steps of the due diligence. They have established their internal due diligence process, and what they have done is, I remember one of the things that we face is that we were among the slowest to actually process a passport in the OECS because we were taking all the steps. The leaders of our CIP program came from the banks, and they were compliance masters and very meticulous. So when you apply through them, they had their internal due diligence process, but then as well, they would send your application to Interpol, do your background check, but then it also went from Interpol to the regional securities or impacts regional security system. A lot of countries have notably bypassed that last stage, and that has opened up a whole host of issues. We see, for example, in the case of Dominica, we had the former Nigerian energy minister that had a whole scandal in that country where she was accused and was wanted by her government for millions and millions and millions of funds that she has cheated her country. You've had the Iranian national, Mr. Manfred, who had a diplomatic passport from Dominica. And as well, that caused a significant embarrassment to the government of Dominica, to the people of Dominica, and to the whole CIP regime in the Caribbean. The other thing was to set up a joint CIP secretariat for the OECS countries, so that we would have standardized rules that are being managed. Again, as well, for increased transparency, so to list in a very public place as possible all of the people who have applied, so that the population, so that if anyone has any suspicion about the respective applicants, that they could say, hey, I know John Brown, and he is not an applicant of good character. So increased transparency, more due diligence, standardize, the price minimum of 200,000, as well as a secretariat, among a whole host of other provisions that the European Union. The sticky thing for me, and why I believe that the government has dealt with this in a very reckless way, is that the Europeans have been working very closely with the Caribbean countries to put this together. And so the OECS countries didn't come up with this by themselves. So when Philip J. Pierre and Ernest Hilaire is going to say that they have contractual obligations and that's why they couldn't sign, to me this is a slap in the face of the European Union. And I think that this is a very dangerous precedent and step that they have taken, because they should have known that the Europeans would have had these concerns. In opposition, they should have known, because as Prime Minister, I'm sure that the leader of the opposition, all of us knew that the CIP programs in the Caribbean, even before we came into government, were of much concern to the European Union, to the US. There is a committee in the US Congress that has sponsored legislation to penalize CIP countries. And so this conversation has been going on between OECD countries and the governments of the Caribbean for quite some time to clean up their act with the CIP. And so now we've reached this stage. This is really crunch time, and we are in dire straits, if you ask me.
So what you're saying is, although it took quite a while to process our passports through the CIP, anybody who went through our system, I mean, when I say our system, I mean the solution system back then, was golden, because all of the checks and balances were done, all of the due diligence was done, and no step was bypassed.
Absolutely, that's what we're saying. Inside, sometimes I used to, when the CIP minister who's sitting right next to me came to cabinet and did the reports, I personally got frustrated because Dominica, St. Kitts, all of them were selling a lot more CIP passports faster than we were, because it is clear now with a lot of the developments and information that we have that they were bypassing the system. And we had two bankers. One was the chairman and one was the CEO, and they did an amazing job to ensure that the reputation of St. Lucia was protected, that everything was above board and it was clean. And I must commend the minister of the former minister for the CIP portfolio, who's sitting right next to me, who served as the prime minister and leader of our cabinet, who said, guys, often the race is not for the swiftest. We have to make sure that we keep the integrity of the passport of St. Lucia, that we keep this clean, and everything is not about money. One of the comparisons I often made as Minister for Tourism, I said, look, why is Dominica getting They don't even have an international airport. They don't even have a mature tourism product. Of all the OECS countries, I felt that we were so much more advanced and had so much more to offer. And I am understanding why now that was happening. And I'm very glad I had a boss who was a stickler. For the compliance and for the procedure.
Right. So, so I hear you. It affected us because we weren't getting as many maybe applicants, and even those applicants that we got, it was taking a while. So I could imagine that it didn't augur well for somebody else coming in and saying, "Yeah, I have to wait a year to get through this process, or 6 months to get through this process." Whereas if I go through Dominica, I can get through this process in 3 months. However, our price was a bit higher than our colleagues, not so?
Originally. Originally, our price was $250,000, and we also had a minimum net worth. But those were lofty goals, but the reality is we were not going to be competitive. So we had to match price. But we took the more onerous road, arduous road, of making sure that our borders were protected.
Right.
And so really the MOA is being driven by the Europeans to protect their borders. So these are the standards that they would expect to see in place to have confidence in the program. And really,
one of the things we did was to remove Iranian applicants as well.
But the point that Dominic was making is really, the OECS is seen as one. And a person who has a Dominican passport has access to St. Lucia. So there is a lot of merit in operating together. So if we want to look at it, maybe a CIP program, because St. Vincent has refused to participate in the program. Imagine if we could get the OECS Secretariat to be the CIP board for all of us. So all the applications went through there, was properly staffed. That some of the money that we earned through the CIP that was collected would go to fund and strengthen the OECS Secretariat. So really fast track regionalism, integration. And that the monies go into an account that's a development bank for the OECS, only for the OECS, overseen by the central bank or a group of other agencies, right? And that we then all could apply for those funds. I think it would be hard-pressed for the Europeans, the Canadians, and the British to be offended by that program, because they were involved in CIP as well, right? So let's not, think that this is our brainchild, okay? America is notorious for persons who are talented to get fast-tracked on citizenship.
Of course, because I'm thinking even Canada, for you to get certain citizenship, your permanent residency, you have to bring something to the table.
Well, Canada had a massive CIP program.
Exactly.
Targeted specifically at the Chinese who were in Hong Kong. I mean, Vancouver was built on that success.
That's correct.
So this is not new. We didn't invent this all by ourselves, all right? This is a legitimate option that some countries have. And given the size of our populations, etc., that there's an opportunity. I think what they want to do is to make sure that those programs are being done in a way in which it maintains our sovereignty to do so, but we're not going to be a security threat to those countries. Now, I think that the things that they've put in are also meaningful for us, because we would want to know that we have the cooperation of the Europeans. We would like to have access to their security databases, so they would be much more robust than what ours are. So the reason why the files are sent to Impacts and sent to RSS is because Impacts and RSS have access to all of those international databases. Okay? So we would like to see that strengthened, not weakened. But we are where we are today, and what is at threat is that countries have refused to do an integrated process. This MOA is the first time where 4 countries now have agreed. And it's shocking to me that St. Lucia, that was a leader in strengthening the integration, strengthening the background checks, that now finds itself off of that list. And the question is, what is at risk for St. Lucians? if in fact we don't participate.
Now, I'm glad you said that. What is at risk for St. Lucia? Because there are a number of words that you're using that's setting off bells in my head. You said it's a security threat for our allies, the Americans, the Canadians, the Europeans. And now we're hearing about this lawsuit, this RICO lawsuit that has been issued, and one of our own has been mentioned, or should I use the word from our Prime Minister, has now been fingered in this lawsuit. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that affects us in St. Lucia and why we should care about McLeod Emmanuel, who has now been named, even though it's not technically the country St. Lucia, but he is the head of our CIU unit, and how does that affect us and why we should care about that?
You want to take a first?
Yeah. But before I do that, I want to just compliment something that the political leader said, and that is the benefits of the way forward and the closer collaboration. One of the things that always affected our ability to maximize the potential of the CIP was the race to the bottom. Every island had to try to compete on price, and that affected our ability to build more roads and do more social programs and invest more of the CIP into where it really matters, into people's lives. And so by now saying that all of us are going to be at 200,000 creates more money in the treasuries of respective countries for us to do more for the people, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in the case when we were there, we spent money on bananas to recover the banana industry after storms. We spent money on, for example, National Hospital, for example. We spent money on providing roof covering for housing in after a storm had hit our country. So by being able to do so, if you have more money, just imagine what else you can do with those funds. And so for me, that's critical in maximizing the returns from the fund. To now answer your question, I will say that what is at stake here is, first and foremost, I'll touch on the visa-free access, and then I'll leave the rest to our political leader. Think of how many people travel to Martinique from St. Lucia for medical reasons, for work, for shopping, for doing business, for seeing family members who live there. Think of the amount of disruption that it will cause to so many people. I know in the constituency I formerly represented, there are at least 15 people who are raising funds to do all kinds of different things, whether it is brain surgery, whether it is cancer treatment, whether it is heart replacements. So many important medical interventions that are necessary. And you know what, Laura? Just imagine you need a visa to go to Martinique to do those procedures. A privilege that we take for granted now, because we can just hop on the boat, we pay $300 or $350 with Express de Zile, and we go across. This is how most people do it. But just imagine that was taken away from you, and you now had to go and apply for a visa. It takes several months, and all of the things that obtain with trying to go to other countries now. This is a major privilege that we have. And the St. Lucia Labour Party administration, they're gambling with that privileges. They're doing a disservice to the people of St. Lucia. And the way that they're managing the affairs of our CIP program is extremely reckless. And I am appalled at the manner in which they're treating this. They're treating this as if everything is okay. But as the political leader has said, the European Parliament is about to vote from what the Commission has already recommended. And so when the Parliament ratify that into law, we are going to be in dire straits. What is interesting to me is that before Philip J. Pierre was reluctant, and he said he had contractual arrangements. Now, why is it the head of a CIP saying that he will sign the agreement? I think it's important for us to know when. And I think that our credibility is already damaged because of the manner in which this government is dealing with, or the process by which they're dealing with trying to come to the table and be on board with the other countries. So harmony is absolutely crucial because the livelihoods, the health and the well-being of too many St. Lucians require this to be done very, very urgently.
Now you said something, it's important for us to know when, and timing seems to be a malady or malaise that the St. Lucia Labour Party seems to be suffering from. They don't seem to get their timelines correct.
But that's a lie, Laura. That's when you lie, you lose your timelines.
Right.
Because if you had, I'm sorry for talking over you, but I'm so passionate about this issue. If you really wanted to support this important venture to ensure that those people we've spoken about going to Martinique, students going to Taiwan needs to go through the UK. It becomes very difficult if the UK then pulls the plug on you as they did in Dominica. Yeah? So the government said to us before that they had contractual arrangements that they couldn't break. If that was the truth, why is the CEO of the CIP unit saying that he has spoken to the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister is now willing to sign?
Again, it's important because we know that just this week we were told that they stopped selling passports to the Russians in February of this year. But prior to that, they told us they had stopped in March of 2022. So if we can feel the impact of that, I can just imagine how our allies may be feeling. And again, it goes back to the security threat. We cannot trust anything this Prime Minister says. We cannot trust anything this regime says. And, you know, it affects, as Senator Fedee said, persons who need access, St. Lucians. Our privilege, our patrimony is at risk of being taken away from us. We have our children who need to go through Europe sometimes for school and for healthcare, as was said. How else can we say that we want to stay at $200,000 to sell a passport at $100,000 when everybody else is going up? We seem to be playing catch up a lot, is what I'm trying to say. We were at 200,000, everybody was at 100,000. We took forever and a day to go down to 100,000. Now we went down to 100,000. Everybody's going back up to 200,000, and we're still playing catch up. No. Yeah, we want to stay at $100,000 because we want to have fun. We are due for a break, but when we come back, leader of opposition, I want you to deal with that. Why is it necessary for us to go back to the 200,000, and what implications it has for us at standing 10 toes deep and saying, no, I want to stay. I want to stay. We're due for a break. When we come back, more on the CIP scandal and how even that Global Ports Holding and that scandal has become intertwined in the CIP. Stay tuned.
This levy will not be imposed on any food items. This means, Mr. Speaker, that the cost of food should not change because of the levy.
Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre claims that no other CARICOM countries have received funds from Saudi Arabia and that the $75 million United States loan that he has taken for St. Jude was because of his government's hard work. Here is the truth. Antigua has received $80 million US, Guyana has received $150 million US, Grenada has received $100 million US, Belize has received $77 million US, Bahamas has received $12 million US, and St. Vincent received $10 million. We can't trust Pierre.
Welcome back to the Roundtable. Before we went on break, we talked a lot about the CIP and what it means, what it entails, and why we should care that we are now embroiled in a RICO lawsuit as it pertains to our CIP, and why we're not in favor of harmonizing with our brothers and sisters in our region. But before we continue to talk about the lawsuit, I want to read to you the notes in our passport. This passport, our highest patrimony. When you apply for a passport, a St. Lucian passport as we know it, you're given this little book, and in the back of the book, it has some notes. And I'm just going to read a few of what the notes say. And note 1, it says that the passport is a valuable document. It should be safeguarded with the utmost care and not allowed to pass into the possession of any unauthorized person. In note number 2, it says a St. Lucia passport issued by the competent authorities at the Immigration Office, Castries, St. Lucia. Passports should not be sent from one country to another by post. It also says in the notes, or rather in observations, when we go down, there's warning and observations. In the warnings it says, the passport is the property of the government of St. Lucia. Alterations, additions, or mutilation of this document are prohibited. Any unofficial change will render the passport invalid. This is so important. This little book, yes, we have the privilege of using it, but as it says in the warning, it is the property of the government of St. Lucia. So whatever the government of St. Lucia does with these little books that they're issuing has a direct implication to us, the citizens, our privileges as citizens of this country. So bear this in mind. Gentlemen, before we went on break, we spoke about this RICO lawsuit. And in this lawsuit, McLeod Emmanuel, who heads the CIP unit, was fingered. My question is St. Lucia in fact not fingered? Because St. Lucia, the country, was not named St. Lucia as a part of this lawsuit? Or how does McLeod Emmanuel being sued or named as an actor in this lawsuit, how does it affect us in St. Lucia, and why should we care?
Look, this lawsuit is real. So I think the Prime Minister's attempt to say, oh, they've not been served, right? Because it is a U.S. court, it's not like a St. Lucia court, and that you're going to be served right away. So I think permission has to be sought, from my understanding of the system, within the U.S., to allow those persons to be served here. But to say that the case has not been filed is wrong.
Oh, so when the Prime Minister says, this is just a paper, it's just a paper, just reading from a paper, nobody has gotten any papers, nobody has been served, he's being disingenuous.
In part, it's a half-truth, okay? So I don't know, because I'm not the one being served, whether in fact that they have actually been served like you would be in St. Lucia. Bailiff has appeared and given you the documentation. But we have confirmed, and for the media have confirmed, other people have confirmed, that the case has been filed in a Tampa court in the US. Now, let's use an example. There was a minister of government in Barbados that got accused of money of bribery. Yes? Where an insurance company admitted to bribing the politician. The politician apparently received the money and transferred the money to a U.S. account. The U.S. then used that information and said, well, he obtained that money illegally, and therefore when the money was transferred to the U.S. into the account, it's money laundering. And he was actually convicted and went to jail. Yet in Barbados, they have not even begun the process of convicting him for bribery.
So he was convicted and found guilty in the courts
In the U.S.
In the U.S.
And went to jail.
and went to jail, but it has not. So in other words, even though he has not been served here in St. Lucia, it doesn't mean that he's not culpable, or that he hasn't been fingered, or been a part of this lawsuit.
Correct. Okay. So the court case is a RICO case. It's a case that was used again to go after the mafia, to seize their assets. And it's a civil case, and I want to make that distinction. So this gentleman, Philip Martinez, MSR, is a French and U.S. citizen who is in the film business. And my understanding is that he opened up a CIP program to do movies in St. Kitts.
So he's a recipient of.
No, he was, like Galaxy, was an agent, was given permission to sell citizenship to help fund the doing films in St.
Kitts. Okay.
And he also bought a hotel, a very famous hotel in St. Kitts called the Lemon Hotel. My understanding is that he felt that his success to sell CIP programs to fund the movies was being undermined because of the underselling of the CIP by Galaxy. Okay? And so the case was to recover what he considers to be his losses. He says that he attempted to work with the government, warn the government about what was going on, provided the government with information. And I think that he's speaking specifically about Tim Harris and the Attorney General under the former Prime Minister and the former Attorney General and other entities. And he's claiming that those persons did not respond to him.
So why didn't he just do as Galaxy was doing and sell it? If he's selling it, if it's meant to be sold at 100,000 and Galaxy is selling at 65, why didn't he just match what Galaxy was doing?
Because it's corruption. And as a U.S. citizen and as a French citizen, he would be culpable not only in St. Kitts, but he would be culpable in the United States, right? So American companies are not allowed to be involved in any form of corruption. And even if that act takes place outside of the U.S. territory, they would be subject to prosecution in the U.S.
And just tell us, because we're speaking to the masses, and a lot of people don't understand. Because I've even had people say to me, if I have a store and I have a shirt, it's $100, and I have somebody selling those shirts for me, and they decide, okay, it's maybe $100, but I can sell it for 65. I could sell it for 65. It's just a discount.
But that's not a good example, because that's in your private capacity. Mm-hmm. Remember, the price to sell the passports is approved by Parliament.
It's a law.
It's a law.
And so, and this is why I'm asking those questions. So, to undercut, you have to go through Parliament, and Parliament has to give you permission to sell at 65.
Correct.
You can't just sell at 65. You can't just do whatever you want. It has to be an act of law.
It's gazetted, it's SI'd, there is an official price. You cannot.
So that is being done outside of, so in other words, Galaxy is breaking the law.
Look, I don't want to go as far as to say that. Mm-hmm. The allegation here is that they are. Okay? And the question is, is there proof that they are doing so?
Hence the lawsuit.
Hence the lawsuit. Now, this lawsuit is a civil case. The gentleman has also indicated that he has provided all of the evidence that he's obtained and given it to the law enforcement agents in the US and in Europe. So there's a possibility that there may be further action that would be criminal. Because again, the US may look at this, and then you ask yourself the question, how does the US get involved in this? So two things that happened. When apparently Mr. Martinez made these comments publicly in St. Kitts and accused the former Prime Minister and made allegations against Les Can and Galaxy, a lawsuit ensued. and Timothy Harris decided to take a defamation action against Philip Martinez. And the lawyer for Timothy Harris was our very own Peter Foster. So it means that for St. Lucia, and I would have to believe to some extent, I don't know, for the Labour Party, that they would have known about Philip Martinez
So he's not a stranger.
long before all of
All
this.
of this.
So these allegations that United Workers' Party is behind us, I want to dismiss that right off the cuff. We have learned about this information like everybody else. I think that we've probably done a better job of due diligence to confirm the legitimacy and why, the reasoning behind what's going on and what the next steps are going to be. And we're doing so because we want to know what exposure St. Lucia has. What is our exposure in this situation? The RICO case, and Dominic is better placed than me. He's read the entire document several times, so I know that he can quote from several things. But the principle is of the RICO case is in the case of Claude Emmanuel, he's being called out because they have a taped conversation of his where he is providing information as to how the program is working in St. Lucia, specifically with Galaxy, and who the players are. So he makes direct reference to the minister, that the minister is in the know, very much involved, and really the one calling all the shots, and that they are hoping that the Europeans will not take away the visa-via regime for a while, which would give them an opportunity to be able to sell these things. These are damning, if true, these are damning statements. Now, I don't know why somebody would go as far as to file these items in court and not have the evidence that he claims that he has. Now, the fact is, remember, he offered the government of St. Lucia the opportunity to come to Washington, D.C.
And this is what I was about to ask.
Before he filed the case.
Right. We could have avoided.
And let's understand, what is it that he's ultimately attempting to do? He is attempting to get the governments of this region to harmonize their stuff and to allow bad players to be punished.
But instead, he's been called a sore loser and a crook.
So the fact is that the St. Kitts' Prime Minister's response to this filing of this case was to say that if there's any evidence that historically that a passport was issued illegitimately, whether it was underpriced or through a bad process, he would withdraw that citizenship. Instead, our government is saying, oh, this has nothing to do with us. Well, the players are the same players. So LesCan, Galaxy are the same players, right? That were involved, that these allegations are being thrown at. And LesCan, his involvement is not as Galaxy, but LesCan was the head of the CIP in St. Kitts. And there are allegations that he colluded. Now, I'm just saying these are allegations. This is coming up in the case. I'm not here to substantiate one way or the other whether these things are true. But I can tell you that there is smoke.
Well, there's more than smoke, because if there is taped evidence of the head of our CIP unit saying how these things are going to work, and he's saying that he's hoping that the process is so protracted that in the meantime we get to do all of these things and usher in those 11,000 passports that's on the back burner to, what's the term he used? Grandfather, 11,000 passports?
So but let's understand what, and again, I think that this government repeatedly attempts to confuse the public about what the facts are. Okay? And so what you end up hearing more often than not, well, both parties were the same. Okay? Because when everybody gets very, very confused and they just say they don't want to take the time, I don't mean solutions don't want to take, but it's not easy to go and get this. Everybody's very busy. People are busy trying to survive versus wanting to go and take time to go and read all these documents and understand all these different documents. So this is the role of the opposition. And I want to say something because the English language is very important. People think that it's the role of the opposition to oppose for anything. It's not. The role of the opposition is to provide an opposing view. Okay? An opposing view. So our points that we're bringing up on this CIP program is to say that the government is not dealing with this thing as seriously as they ought to. There is a lot at stake for our visa-free access. There's a lot at stake if, in fact, monies are genuinely not going where they're supposed to go. That means that these are monies that could have been going to help reduce the price of bread, to have helped reduce the price of gas, to have helped build schools, reduce what people are costing.
Reduce the cost of living.
To reduce the cost of living, okay? But instead, we don't know where the money is.
But we know that there is money because didn't they say they made in excess of $68 million?
Right. So this government, look, whether it was the NLA funds, 80 million, whether it's the GPH, 440 million US dollars, whether it's now CIP. So I think before I break down what in fact this government is seen to be doing. So right now we know they're in denial about this court case. Question is why? They felt that they could fight the Europeans and cause the Europeans to give them a grace period, okay? Despite not appreciating what the Europeans and everybody else's fare are from a security perspective. That is what in essence is going on. So it's for us to call them out to say, no, you have to take this thing seriously, okay? And you are the ultimate caretaker of that document.
That's right.
The document is owned by whom?
The government of St. Lucia. It says so.
Right.
It
So the
says
government of St. Lucia owns it. It's your responsibility to make sure that when I hold that up, that it stands for something. Today it stands for me being able to go to over 140 countries in the world without a visa. Okay? That's the ultimate respect that they can pay you. You can come to my country. I trust you enough that you can come without a visa. We benefit from that. Anything that jeopardizes the loss of that, all of us lose. If in fact that we are earning money on selling that citizenship, we have to be assured that that money is being used for us and with the best intentions, and none of it is being siphoned off. This court case is making allegations that in the case of St. Kitts, that there was illegalities taking place, that evidence had been presented to the previous governments, and that they did not act on it. And therefore, this individual is now taking in court on that. Now, because he's a U.S. citizen, and when the lawsuit was applied to him, as a U.S. citizen, he was now able to subpoena information in the U.S. And my understanding is the most damning information that he has is the information now he's obtained from the U.S. banks. Because the Citizenship by Investment program is sold in U.S. dollars currency. And the monies go through the U.S. correspondent banks. So he has now used the courts to get access to that information and to open up people's accounts and then to trace the money. So it's one thing now to be suspicious, to say, I believe that there's some form of collusion taking place here.
And we could have avoided anything beyond that had we gone to that meeting and sat at the table.
We would have, if they had gone to the meeting, they would have been able to ascertain them for themselves whether this is legitimate. I don't know. Okay? I've only understood what he is saying that he has. He made an offer. Okay? They didn't go. Now that the case has been filed, you said the case would have never been filed, that this was all a bluff. Okay? The case has been filed. And in fact, a person in St. Lucia has been named.
So they spat in the face of the gentleman, and now they're scurrying.
And they're continuing to do that. And why should all of us care is because this government continues to betray all of us. Has this government been an honest broker with the people of St. Lucia? They've lied about the 2.5% tax. They've lied about the bananas land. They've lied about what is going on with CIP.
They've lied about the Russians.
They've lied about the Russian. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things they've lied about in the whole CIP.
And the betrayal continues.
So the question is now, given their own track record, they owe it to us. We're not going to get the truth from this government. And the definition of insanity is when we continue to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. Simply shaming has not worked with this government. It hasn't.
And we see that constantly in different platforms.
So
when we don't want to answer the questions, we try to shame people.
So all of a sudden, you've had 2 Chinese people in the last 2 weeks who got citizenship through St. Kitts, who then got visa access into the US and into the UK, right? Who have now been arrested on fraud, and that the documentation that they used to get the citizenship in St. Kitts in the first place was false. So it means it raises red flags about the due diligence process. Now all of a sudden, the truth is the Europeans are not going to give them any time. June is on our door. This court case is pending, right? So there's a tremendous amount of pressure, and that they are succumbing now to that pressure. But they're not succumbing to the pressure of the responsibility that they have to the citizens of this country.
I have one question for you. You're the leader of opposition. If this was happening under your watch, what would have been your first course of action? Because we do remember what this sitting Prime Minister said about anybody in his cabinet or surrounding him who has been fingered with corruption.
So
what would have been your first course of action?
The CEO would have to be suspended. There would have to be an independent investigation. And if I was the minister of the CIP, I would transfer my responsibilities to another person pending the outcome of this.
Because it happened under your watch.
Happened on my watch.
But not only that, he's a co-conspirator according to the lawsuit. So in section 109
Explain
of the
to us.
lawsuit, it says this: as Deputy Prime Minister, co-conspirator Ernest Hilaire allows defendant Caribbean Galaxy to operate its fraudulent scheme in
Read that
St.
again.
Lucia.
Read that again and take it slow.
As Deputy Prime Minister, co-conspirator Hilaire allows defendant Caribbean Galaxy to operate its fraudulent scheme in St. Lucia.
So Galaxy
in the
has not been
lawsuit-
suspended. The operations has not been suspended. Nobody has been suspended. It's business as usual.
No, but the point is, it is saying that based on the recording they have received from defendant Emmanuel McLeod, who's the head of the CIP unit, McLeod says that the minister, Ernest Hilaire, in that recording, McLeod is alleged to have said that Ernest Hilaire knew and knows that Galaxy is underselling the passport. And that is a very damning allegation that the lawsuit is making. Now, for the government of St. Lucia to say that this has nothing to do with them, when the CIP minister is being fingered, to me,
And the CEO.
And the CEO.
Well, the CEO is fingering the minister.
Well, no, I
But
think
he's
that...
still the CEO. But if in fact that he believed at any time that the minister was acting illegally, you would have expected the chairman, the board, and everybody else to have riled up.
So this goes even deeper because
It's a damning allegation.
there is no checks and balances, or is there such a deep well of collusion?
They're suggesting that what St. Kitts is being accused of is also taking place in St.
In St. Lucia.
Correct.
So I want you to understand that that's really what the allegation is. That when Galaxy, and look, United Workers' Party are the ones who brought Galaxy to St. Lucia. Okay? The real estate program was an existing program. The minister here knows, not my favorite program. Because the money goes into an escrow account. While an escrow account is relatively safe, it's still an independent account. This is why when we did the deal with Range, instead of doing it as a real estate deal, we did it under the our national program.
Yeah.
So what we said is go out and sell the program, put people through our economic donation program. We will then turn around and lend you the money, okay, for the investment. Why? Because it means the money would have come into St. Lucia. If he sold the passport for $100,000, he had to put $100,000 in. If somebody is deliberately underselling in the marketplace, you should be able to figure it out, but it's not necessarily guaranteed that you will. And what the allegation is being made here, Laura, the allegation that's being made is that the government of St. Lucia is colluding, okay, to defraud the state. That is a damning
allegation. And you know,
and warrants an independent investigation. The government needs to step away from this, and somebody needs to go in and do an audit.
Are you suggesting that government be prorogued?
It has to be.
So the lawsuit also says
this is our sovereignty.
Yeah. So remember that the government was telling us that because of contractual obligations, they couldn't sign the contract. The lawsuit now confirms that based on the recording that they allegedly have of the CEO, McLeod Emmanuel, that they have got a contract with Galaxy to do infrastructure works. And it's all here. And that's now very, very shameful that we've got to find this out from a submission in the United States court and not from our own government telling us, look, we have an infrastructure program, we've got a contract with Caribbean Galaxy, this is how much it is. The government owes us an explanation, and I think we need to ask the question now, how many passports have you approved for Caribbean Galaxy to sell in the US program, the infrastructure program? We know that this lawsuit alleges that there is a backlog of 11,000 passports.
Files.
11,000 applications, sorry, that is waiting to be approved by the St. Lucia CIP unit. We want to know how many of those are for Galaxy. Is it all 11,000? Is it 5,000? Is it 10,000?
Now we're due.
We ought to know.
We're due for another
figures.
break. But before we go, I want to understand something. Do we know how much monies must be collected by, say, Galaxy, or how many passports must be sold, and how much of that goes back to the people of St. Lucia? Because in the previous segment, you started, but I don't think we went through all of the options for CIP, and then the first one, we said it's $100,000, and that goes directly into a fund in St. Lucia, and we know exactly what's in there, and we pay whomever is selling, right? And then, but there's a fourth option, and that says that they sell, they collect, and then they give it back to us out of that.
So you're 100% right, and I mean, look, it's very, very confusing, particularly if you've not gone and really understood the details, because most people think it's just about selling a passport, but there are what we call different pathways to citizenship.
Right.
Okay, the most traditional one is you reside in St. Lucia for 7 years. We're all accustomed to that one.
Right.
Okay, you stay in St. Lucia for 7 years, you can apply for citizenship. The next pathway is what we call as a donation. The donation started off at $250,000 and went down to $100,000 by us. And it went down to $100,000, and we've now heard, because everybody else was selling it $100,000.
$100,000.
Okay, you're not going to sell it $250,000, because the same benefits that you would get from a St. path citizenship would be the same benefits you would get from all the other OECS countries. Very, very, very little difference between the two. The next one was a bond. We used to have a bond for $500,000, and then during COVID, we changed it to $300,000. You put the bond in, the money goes into the consolidated account. Yes?
Okay.
And at the end of the 5 years, the consolidated account pays back the person the $300,000. So in essence, we're using the money interest-free for the 5 years. And if you take it at a 6.5% interest, we're saving $100,000 US. So it amounts to the same thing.
Yeah, but if I can just say quickly that when we left office, both the real estate and the bond options were a lot more expensive. And the Labour Party must be honest with the people of St. Lucia. So they met the real estate at $300,000, and they have now reduced the price to $200,000. The bond option was at $500,000, and they have reduced it.
But we reduced it as well because of the COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So I just want to say that there's the four options. The first option we talked about is the donation, $100,000. The money goes into the CIP board. The board then transfers it into what's called the Economic Fund, which is an account here in St. Lucia, and that the board of directors are the director of finance, the director of budget, the chief economist, an attorney, a representative from the Attorney General's office, and a local person.
And so at any point we know exactly what's in there.
Or we're supposed to,
We're supposed to.
because the money is here.
It's here.
The second one is the bond, and as I said, the money from the bond goes into the consolidated account. The government uses the money to help pay expenses, etc. And then that money then is paid back at the end of the 5 years out of the consolidated fund. Just exactly the same way that when we sell bonds, it's the exact same process. The next one was the real estate. There were 2 real estate programs approved: the Alpina Hotel by the what do you call it, the DSH by the track, and Galaxy. The only product that got to the market was Galaxy. So Alpina has never sold one passport. Okay, and the way that it works with the real estate is the government identifies an escrow account. Ideally, we would have preferred the escrow account to be here in St. Lucia, but none of the banks and none of the other financial institutions were prepared to open up an escrow account. They were too scared of it, right? And they said it's too big money. They're not prepared to do that. So in the case of Galaxy, an escrow agent, these are international, was identified in China. It was done in China because the expectation was that a lot of the materials that they would have sourced would have been out of China to begin with, right? So the way that escrow account works, it's a contract. So I come to you, Laura, and I say, Dominic and I are in a business partnership, okay? I'm going to invest in Dominic's business. So I'm going to let you hold the money, right? And here's the conditions. When Dominic provides you with the following forms of documentation, yes, then you can pay him. The purpose of that is for Dominic to know that the money is there. The purpose for me to know is that money is being paid, but it's not being given to him until he fulfills his obligation. And that's in a contract. So it means I have to make sure I'm staying in touch with you at all times to make sure that you're executing my wishes. And at any time that I want to know how much money is in there, I can ask you.
Right.
And you have to provide it to me.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
The next one now is the infrastructure program, which is, as Dominic just said, been made available in the lawsuit. We've heard it being mentioned by the minister and the prime minister, but we've never gotten
Full announcement or launching, proper press release.
There was something changed in an SI and gazetted back in December, right? Who the average public doesn't know. Our understanding of how the infrastructure program is going to work is that the company, and we understand, we have not gotten any confirmation, we understand that that company is Galaxy. Okay, so Galaxy can go out and sell our citizenship for $100,000. The money goes directly to them. Okay, and that they in turn are going to agree to fund infrastructure programs on behalf of the state. So they can either build houses, they can do roads, they can do other things.
So they're acting as an agent of the government.
Correct.
But didn't you say that in the first option, it's $100,000 and we collect that money and that money is in an account in St. Lucia and we could do whatever we want with it and we know how much is in there. Well, we should know how much is in there.
Correct. Correct.
So doesn't number 4 cancel out number, because nobody's against themselves. If I'm acting as an agent.
Correct. Correct. So now the plot thickens. So the government has not told us how this is going to work. We've seen in other countries in the OECS where a third party has been identified and given permission to sell the CIP program, that they collect the money, okay, and then they come and build things in their country. We're understanding that they collect $4 and spend $1. So I want all of us to understand what I'm saying. If they're going to do a $10 million road, how much money are they allowed to collect before they pay for the $10 million? Do they collect the $10 million and simply take a commission? Are they going to sell $20 million in order to be able to pay for $10 million? The question is, where does the $10 million go? Are they willing to sell 30? And as I said to you, the number that we've heard in other territories has been 4-1. So on a $10 million road, they would have sold $40 million of things. And the question is, where is the $30 million gone? Who gets that? And is that fair? Is that considered to be a fair commission for the state not having to acquire debt? And to your point, I mean, you picked it up very quickly. Why would you want to go and sell a pathway to citizenship for $100,000 under those circumstances when you already have $100,000 that you're collecting yourself? And it means the money is here. You would have to go through the procurement guidelines of St. Lucia. So why couldn't you just give the money to the Ministry of Infrastructure? Why can't you give the money to the Ministry of Housing? Why can't you give the money to the Ministry of Education to undertake these worthwhile projects? So I think it is irresponsible. It is intended to deflect people from saying that the United Workers' Party is trying to prevent this program because we're against development of this country. No. We're absolutely in favor of the development of this country. You already have the donation program. We're not happy with the fact that you changed the law that any project approved by cabinet. Okay? So we felt that that was wrong, but nonetheless, at least the money is here. Now, what do we know? And why now can we make the similar claims that was happening in St. Kitts? We have evidence to show that as early as January, that agents in the market were selling this infrastructure program for as low as $65,000, and in most cases, $70,000 to $80,000. We have that. We know that that's a fact. So what Galaxy was being accused of in St. Kitts, right? Whatever the agent is, we heard it's Galaxy. We've gotten zero confirmation. This government has given us zilch. No information. Who is the agent? What are the projects? How much money are they going to collect? What protections are in place to make sure that they're not overselling? They're not getting $4 to 1 or $2 to 1. Nothing. They're just saying everybody else is making false allegations. People want to prevent them from being able to do this and do that. This is rubbish. And given the track record of this government up until now, we have no reason to believe them. They have betrayed the trust of all of us. They've shown that they are capable of corruption. They are.
And so we should not be surprised that we are in this situation that we're in. We're being sued, people. I don't understand. I don't know if you understand, St. Lucia, what we found ourselves in. This is a deep hole that keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper the more we delve into it. We're due for a break, but when we come back, more on the CIP scandal.
Philip J. Pierre says that all state funds should go into the consolidated fund. Here are some examples of Philip J. Pierre's hypocrisy. As we speak, work on the rehabilitation of the Millennium Highway is ongoing. This project is financed by the Caribbean Development Bank. CDB pays the contractor for the Millennium Highway directly. The funds do not go into the consolidated fund. Philip J. Pierre also happens to be the current chairman of CDB. Why aren't the funds going into the consolidated fund if the practice is so unusual as he makes it out to be? Funds from St. Lucia's Citizenship by Investment program also do not go into the consolidated fund. In 2022, the government of St. Lucia collected a whopping $51 million US from the Citizenship by Investment program. Not 1 cent was put into the consolidated fund. What have they done with all this money? Why isn't it going into the consolidated fund? The same contractor that Philip J. Pierre is accusing of facilitating corruption was just awarded a major contract for the new air traffic control tower at Huonora International Airport, and payments will go directly to their account in Panama. In other words, this means that money is not coming into the consolidated fund. Why would a prime minister deliberately spread propaganda and misinformation regarding a practice he follows himself? Why the hypocrisy? What is Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre trying to distract you from? We can't trust Pierre.
Friends, family, and foreigners. Who is McLeod Emmanuel? Who is the Prime Minister really protecting when he says this has nothing to do with the government of St. Lucia? Where has the money gone? What is Thaddeus Antoine's role in this whole scandal? How damning is McLeod Emmanuel's alleged tape? Welcome back to the final segment of the Roundtable. Gentlemen, over to you.
Yeah. So, Laura, we've got a real... The lawsuit has made some real damning claims. And I think just for transparency and just for the benefit of your viewers, I want to share some of the contents of the lawsuit. So, provision or clause 108 of the lawsuit, which is on page 75, if you can get a copy online from the U.S. The Tampa courts. So the plaintiff, which is MSR, the person who filed the lawsuit, learned from an audio recording of defendant Emmanuel, which is the head of St. Lucia CIP, that the vast majority of the St. Lucia citizenship shares sold by defendant Caribbean Galaxy are subject to this fraudulent financing scheme. That's a damning allegation.
So that is the discounting that was taking place.
Correct.
The fraudulent financing scheme was the allegations that they were selling the citizenship that was worth $200,000, selling it for $120,000 under the premise that they were providing financing for it. So that means that at the end of the day, government of St. Lucia was being told they had received $200,000. They weren't being told, maybe, I don't know, that was $120,000 in cash and $80,000 in an IOU, right? And then the person gets their citizenship.
But for the head of your CIP to say this, does paint your country in a very bad light and paints your program in a very bad light as well.
It's admission that the state knew about it and facilitated it.
Without going through the proper channels.
Right, and I think that
there was no proper channel. It's illegal.
Yes, and with this kind of accusation, the CEO needs to come out and deny this if this is not true. I mean, it's been, what, 48 hours? So we haven't seen...
And we haven't heard anything.
Yeah, and I want to repeat, the United Workers' Party has said publicly, I said it, that we will do an audit. We will require everybody who's gotten the citizenship by investment program to prove that they paid what they were supposed to pay. And anyone who cannot provide that evidence, right, we will rescind their citizenship because it would have been obtained illegally. Because as we said, it's the law.
So if they were supposed to have paid $200,000, they paid $100,000.
Done.
Automatic scratch, as they would say.
They'll be given the opportunity to pay the remaining amount of money. Okay? But if they don't pay the money, then the citizenship would be rescinded.
Okay. Yeah, so the lawsuit also claims that in this voice note that they have of McLeod, he went on to say that Caribbean Galaxy has complete control in dictating who can sell citizenship shares on its behalf and exercises complete control over the CIP program in St. Lucia. That's a very damning statement.
Dictating and complete control?
Dictating and complete control. These are the allegations that the Prime Minister needs to investigate very soon and to ask whether these allegations are true. Not to blame Alan Chastanet and the United Workers' Party. This is very damning. This document is globally. I'm sure that the US State Department would have a copy of this. I'm sure that the EU would have a copy of this by now. And so when the Prime Minister would have allowed these allegations to go, the world is watching in terms of how we deal with it. So coming to play politics on a very important national issue like this. This scandal requires clarity, it requires class, it requires statesmanship, it requires the Prime Minister to come and to say, is Galaxy really in control of you need
But
to
it
deny
reads as if Galaxy is a department of the government of St. Lucia.
Well, and then this
But that's
is,
what it says.
Yeah.
Galaxy is in complete control.
and this is where our own due diligence comes in. Who is the lawyer for Galaxy? The lawyer for Galaxy is Thaddeus Antoine. Who is the agent that's processing the most number of files? Is Thaddeus Antoine's firm. So there's a real benefit to him if in fact Galaxy is able to sell more citizenships.
Hence the first
So
F,
hear what the
friends.
lawsuit says
No.
about that.
And so the question is, do we believe, is there any credibility to the statement? Well, we know that Thaddeus has a significant relationship with Ernest Hilaire.
Friends, lawyer. So this is the first F. I remember in opposition, the FFF, friends, family, and foreigners, and it seems that they're using friends and families, or the friends and families are coming in play through the foreigners.
Correct.
So the MSR Media, who filed this case, also learned from an audio recording of a foreign CIP marketer and promoter that Caribbean Galaxy requires that when foreign marketers sell CIP shares granted to Caribbean Galaxy under one of St. Lucia's investment programs, the promoter must use Caribbean Galaxy's preferred local agents, and that's what you're discussing now.
Oh, wait. So it's not enough that they're
Controlling
they're telling you which lawyer to use, which firm to use,
Yes.
how to go about it. So they're really
the
are
government
in
has
total
done
control.
a tremendous disservice to the local fraternity
Another
in St. Lucia.
betrayal.
So when you ask the question, the Prime Minister's reaction, which we're a bit taken back because here it is that our sovereignty and our visa-free access is under threat, the integrity of St. Lucia is under threat, and then instead now he wants to blame other persons.
So who is he really protecting?
Who is he really protecting? And you asked a very important question. Who is Mr. Emmanuel? Right? Where was he before? The first time I ever got to know him was when we came into government in 2016, and he was the general manager of Radio St. Lucia. I also understand, and he's absolutely entitled to be the campaign manager for Philip Pierre, because we have freedom of conscience. You can make a freedom, that's within your right.
Hold
but
on.
that is an important declaration to be able to make.
That is here in, wow. So he was the campaign manager for the sitting prime minister.
Has been the campaign
Has been the campaign manager for the sitting prime minister.
Correct.
And he's moved from being the general manager
In 2016.
in 2000.
I don't know what he did.
But in between
2000
there, we don't know.
We don't know.
But that was our
So
his last known
let's
job.
Let's look at the persons that because Dominic has mentioned it a couple times. We had a chairman of CIP who was a banker. Okay? International banking. And it was important because the whole issues taking place with correspondent banking was on who know your customer and background checks. So we felt that it was a good fit to bring a person of that ilk to that position. The person who was the CEO was a person who worked in banking and who was in compliance. That's what his job was. His job was to make sure that people who were depositing monies into the bank, that we knew where it was coming from, and in order to make sure they maintain the relationship with the correspondent banks internationally. That's what their job is. Here is a person who was, up until 2016, was a general manager of
radio station.
Radio station. You're putting this gentleman in this position, and then to make matters worse, he's there, but is he really Ernest's guy? Because he's the Prime Minister's guy. And then let's not forget, and again,
So who really is he working for?
And then now you also have, and this is where these things come back to bite you. The Prime Minister justified and told us there was nothing to be concerned of when his daughter was hired at CIP.
Wait, hold on. So not only do we have friends involved here, we have the second F coming into play. The daughter of the Prime Minister works in the CIP unit.
Correct.
So again,
We then
who
had-
is the Prime Minister
we-
really
we-
protecting?
We had a situation where the chairman of CIP, who is today he's chairman, tomorrow he's not. I have no idea whether he's resigned. We've heard that he has resigned. We've heard he's been asked not to resign. We don't know.
So this is a complete mess.
But he did what? He went and gave a lawyer in his firm a license to be an agent. And we said, hold on, right? This is wrong. So there is behavior locally, because we know who all the players are. There's conflicts of interest, there is collusion, right? And so the question is, can the story that MSR is telling us, could that possibly be true? Could it possibly? So when you now know that McLeod, or Manuel really isn't au courant with this kind of business, goes and makes these statements, it's taped in saying that Galaxy is running the shop, and taped in saying that the minister is running the shop, and that they know that they're in breach of certain actions. And then you now know that Thaddeus Antoine is the lawyer for Galaxy. You know that he is the primary beneficiary of all the stuff. So the more citizenships that are sold, right, the more his firm benefits. Is there anything wrong with that? No, but he's very close to the decision making.
The question is McLeod really a patsy? Or is he cunningly removing himself from the line of fire? Because the more we delve into this thing, the more we dig into it, we're realizing he perhaps doesn't even have much of a say, because he doesn't control anything. He's perhaps just there as a bubblehead, and he has realized, oh, so I'm going to be left to hold this.
Well, there's 1,001 permutations that we can come up with, right? But what we do know is that the U.S. courts don't play, and Uncle Sam has very long arms.
And I can predict somebody's going to start singing like a canary.
Okay.
I can predict that.
So the
Let's go
document
on.
has already said that the deputy prime minister, I think I've read in the previous segment, but just for emphasis, it says section 109 of the lawsuit. It says, as deputy prime minister, co-conspirator Hilaire allows defendant Galaxy to operate its fraudulent scheme in St. Lucia despite publicly taking issue with Caribbean Galaxy's work while he was in opposition.
So remember, when Galaxy first came to St. Lucia, the then opposition, through Hilaire, said, not a good company.
But it's interesting now that they're running the show. They know that it's not a good company, but then they've given them permission.
And that's a pattern of behavior that we're seeing with this government. They said that we should have moved into the old hospital, chemical and some paint.
Right.
3 years.
They can't move it.
3 years, Laura.
The grade of chemical is not strong enough. It's not strong enough.
And the work that has been taking place there has nothing to do with the old buildings.
Because that's what I'm hearing.
Okay?
That's what I'm hearing.
It is part
it's
of the box. Okay? And the buildings that were being used for the cafeteria and for the administrative block.
Can you believe that?
Okay.
The box in Lucia is what's been worked
And
on.
then deny now that in the budget it says they're going to spend $265 million. So again, that's a great example. They said that what we were doing in View Fort, right, was wrong, that we wanted to make View Fort into Miami. Well, guess what they have done? They've made View Fort back into a ghost town.
Well,
They've made View Fort into, and they call it themselves, what did they call it? A crime zone.
That's correct.
They have identified
They
what
have
they want View Fort to
stigmatized
be.
the View Fort.
Correct.
And they've removed what is potentially a gold mine in terms of employment
They went
from
in,
View Fort,
and they went
in terms of denying the port in View Fort development.
They said that the Rodney Bay Road was corruption. They denied the fact that the Ministry of Infrastructure is involved. The billboards are still there. The billboards are still there to show that the Ministry of Infrastructure was involved. Okay? Everything was being done through the ministry. They had a fixed contract for $15 million to do the 2 roundabouts, the 4 lanes, and the pedestrian walkover. They stopped the project. They now had to turn around and pay the contractor $20 million plus.
More than what it was costing for the project.
Because when they price it out. And now they still have to go and find somebody to go and finish it. And I know what they're going to do. They're going to go and try to get a contract to do the entire shock to Rodney Bay Road and bury that portion.
Bury that cost, right.
Into the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay? So we continuously see this blame game that took place.
The betrayal of the
with
people of St. Lucia.
HIA Airport, the same deal, and we're going to get to it, that they did with GPH is what they were attempting to do with HIA, was to give a third party $60 US per passenger for 30 years. We did it with the Taiwanese for $35 for 15 years. And if in fact we get more passengers, we pay the loan out earlier and we get the money back. So we're saving $25 already for the 15 years. Okay? And then now we're going to save another $60 for 15 more years. Just on the surface of it. Goes back to the GPH deal. Why? The government of St. Lucia was already collecting $6.50. We know, I said it, that the cruise lines had agreed to go to $11 or $12. So we know.
And that we would have been collecting that.
We would have been collecting that.
And so now what, under this new dispensation, what are we collecting?
$1.
So they've sold the port for $1 per passenger. Try to
build $20 or $30 million investment. Now, what I would have said to you, which is a better deal, the government of St. Lucia keeps the $650. If this guy wants to go in and put the money up front to build the port, you do that. You take on that loan yourself. We'll continue paying our other loan because we had the $650 to pay for it, right? You build the expansion. The first set of money that you earn goes to pay off the loan, and after that we share the money.
But we keep our $650.
But you keep your $650
because we came with that. You know, it confuffles me. I come with these things. I come with all of this, and you want to add this one more thing to it, and I have to give all of this up, which I already have, just for this one thing.
And you have to ask yourself why. So if you take 1 million passengers for the 40 years, okay, at $11, at $10 it's 440, okay, $410 million US just on that. And then there's a separate agreement for them to build the Vendors Arcade, the Bonanza Land, and Soufriere, of which now they get the concession. So all the concessionaires who are going to go in those areas are going to pay GPH, not the government of St. Lucia. Now, what is it that we've lost? We've lost over $400 million US over the next 40 years. $10 million US a year.
It's like we're asleep at the wheel.
Okay, do you know what that could pay for? And then meanwhile, by doing this, you're going to undermine the viability of SLASPA as an agency. SLASPA was doing it. The money was coming here. The money was staying here. And then to spit in our faces, they're turning around, GPH is turning around and borrowing the money from Bank of St. Lucia.
I thought every investor had to bring their own money.
Right. But isn't that what they said?
Yeah.
Isn't that what they said? Every investor is going to come. You know, and they speak to leader of opposition, trying to disgrace and diminish the name of St. Lucia on the international stage. But you've never asked anybody not to invest, and you've never asked anybody, to not come in and to do. development in this country. But can we say the same for them?
And look, and my answer to the GPH deal is that we will go through that deal very, very, very closely.
Yeah,
But also more importantly, I want to reiterate it, and I know you would want me to reiterate it, is that we will build the port in Vieux Fort.
I hope so, because we have to destigmatize Vieux Fort. Vieux Fort have gone from being touted as the new frontier to your beautiful hope and dream, and I have to say
the pearl of the Caribbean.
The pearl of the Caribbean, which is now just, you know, a figment now because they've completely destroyed that, to being a crime zone. And they're now putting the nails in the coffin by ensuring that it remains a crime zone. Because what happens when you take away all hope from people? You do not give them jobs. You do not give them anything to aspire to. They're going to want the same things that everybody else wants, and they're going to see everybody else getting it, and they have no hope to get it. So they're going to turn to crime.
Let me give you a real example of that, is the call centers. So it was very difficult to convince Ojo Labs to go to Vieux Fort because nobody had done that in Vieux Fort before. And I explained to them the plan that we had of expanding Vieux Fort and getting people to re-migrate back down south so they would have a more constant support. And I was able to do that because they used to have a facility up north. And when they went back and checked their records, 40% of the people who were working in that facility
came from the south.
And I said, these people would migrate back in a
heartbeat because the cost of living would have dropped.
So we saw for the first time by 2019 a reverse migration. For the first time now, people from the north were going back to the south. Okay?
And even people who were not from the south were migrating to the south for work.
Correct. Okay? And it was, and people were just bursting with optimism. And it begs the question, how did we lose? And I think that that's a very important question to be able, and it's called propaganda. Solutions were made to question our intention and our actions. And despite no evidence, just half-truths. Today, we're here. These allegations that are being made about our CIP program are not being made by the United Workers' Party. The EU, Canada, UK, who did the audit, right? Now, MSR. There are other persons, third-party people, okay, who don't have a vested interest in solution, but are saying because they're fearful of their own security.
You must have some serious clout, because we're hearing that it's your machinations that is causing that. So you must share with us.
That's what Invader said, right?
Alan did that. It's Alan this and Alan that. Alan did this. But you must share your secret with us because we would all like to have some of that. But my question to you, as it pertains to the call centers, what is the future of those call centers now that Vieux Fort has been deemed a crime zone and it's...
And I'm really happy I said because it would be in jeopardy.
Of course. Who wants to operate within not just...
It's going in reverse.
Exactly.
But by now, your airport's supposed to be open, your hospital's supposed to be open, the hotels are supposed to be open in the south.
You have universities have been closed in the south.
Your horse racing track would have been taking place on a regular basis. That Vieux Fort would have become an international city. Despite what's going on in the world, we would have had a head start. This government has taken all of that wind out of our sails, has destroyed the South. That's what's going on. And what I'm saying to you, Laura, a pattern of behavior. Take state monies, put them into third-party entities, that those third parties are no longer liable, accountable to spend the money under our procurement guidelines. When you put the money into the NCA, and the NCA board is selecting contractors, that's not their job. They don't do that. Who got the jobs? I'm still waiting to hear who got the contracts. The minister said that he knew the person, but he couldn't remember the person's company's name, right? We've not heard how much he got. Because my understanding is the same person who got the Darren Salmon Stadium is the same person who got the Groselay Field, and is the same person who got the park, Simples Park. Right? How can that be? And my understanding, he has zero experience as a contractor. And again, the person who got the contract has, by what I understand, a very close relationship to the representative from Groselet. And guess who the board reports to? The Minister of Sports. And the member from Groselet is the Minister of Sports. So all these things are happening right before us. We have
They were telling us, and that's the thing that confounds me even. They were telling us while you guys were in power, they were telling us friends, family, and foreigners, but they weren't saying look out for it.
So the difference is, and I want people to understand what the difference is. They've taken money from NLA, which is supposed to be used for scholarships, to support the sporting programs and youth, to invest in infrastructure. Whereas under my administration, we took the Taiwanese grant money.
Grant, which means we don't have to pay it back. It's free money.
Right? To go. And every term we were going to continue to do the same thing. They accused Don Lockerbie, because Don Lockerbie got paid $3 million, $2.5 million they said for consultancy. The $33 million went into the infrastructure. And yes, Lockerbie's firm, not Lockerbie, got paid $2.5 million. But it's okay to go and turn a fictitious company that we don't know who it is, $2.5 million to redesign the George Odlum Stadium. We forget that. Up to now, we don't know who the contractor and what the process for selection of the persons who are building custody suites. And we're confused because in the budget it says $1.5 million, but the Prime Minister said it was $4.5 million. We're seeing
math is not mathing.
Right, and the same thing is happening in CIP. All kinds of reaction and dates, to your point, facts that are not connected. I want to say the last one. Probably as bad as all of this is, what I'm understanding, and I need clarification, is that from the time of the election, Wasco's desilting program in the dam stopped. So you're supposed to be doing desilting on a regular basis during the rainy season. One of the first things that we did when the desilting started, and remember the desilting program was designed by CDB, so that's what we inherited, was to clear the bottom valve. So think of the face wall of the dam, and there are different holes. Those holes are used to extract water, right? So when the water drops below a certain point, then you go to the next hole. When it goes below that level, then you go to the next hole. Well, the last hole was blocked. So it means that you never were getting the full use of the dam.
Right.
So the first thing they did was to clear that out. So I'm asking the question, is it true that desilting did not continue? And is it true that the lower valve intake water outlet is blocked? Because then if that's the case, that would significantly explain why we have a water problem today. And for the government...
So the water problem, therefore, would not be a crisis or an emergency.
No.
It would be bad management.
No, because Laura,
Correct.
when we desilted, so first of all, there was 1.5 million cubic meters of silt, which is equivalent to 50 football
Which came from the
fields.
hurricanes.
Yeah.
Thomas in particular.
Thomas, Christmas Eve Trough, and Debbie, as far back as Debbie. Now, and that is a lack of maintenance over the decades. Now, that's 50 football fields, 20 foot high of silt. I want you to imagine that.
Repeat
That's
that
the
again.
amount.
50?
How many?
50 football fields,
50.
High.
20 feet high.
Yes.
50.
50 football fields,
Out like
Wide.
this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
20 feet high. That's the amount of silt that we found in the dam.
And the question is, where were you going to put the silt?
Right. So we made the desedimentation area, the area
On the other side of the dam.
on the other side of the mountain. We created this area that you could then slush out the silt into what is called the desedimentation area. In
So
doing that
it does, so
exercise-
just explain what that allows. It allows the silt, which has water in it, for the silt to go there, for the water to drain out.
Yeah. And when you take out water and silt, 70% was water, and 30% was silt. Which is why you could only do this in the dry season.
No, the wet season.
In the wet season, sorry. My correction. Now, that only accounted, one go at this, one desilting exercise, only accounted for 10% of that silt. It means that having lost the election, and we
So it
put
means
a-
it would take you 10 years,
10 years to do.
desilt it, assuming there was no more silting.
Correct.
But they're silting on a regular
But they're
basis.
silting on a regular basis. The rains yesterday would have caused silt to come into the dam, albeit not as much as Debbie and Tomas and all the other tropical storms. Now, the problem that if you don't desilt is that the silt is coming back and you are not desilting. And so you're creating a smaller storage space. When the dry season comes, then the water evaporates and then you're in trouble. And so this government, instead of being focused, instead of coming and say, look, let's have a program, the United Workers Party started a good maintenance program of the dam. Let's continue this. And by continuing this, we will, by the time we get to 2032, we would have completely desilted the dam of about 95% of the silt. They didn't do that long.
And instead, what did they do? They went on a witch hunt.
They went on a witch hunt. There was a proposal for a dredge, for Wasco to buy its own dredge. $2.5 million US was the cost. And this government shelved the plan to buy Wasco its own dredge to go and desilt the dam. We were going to create local jobs, train local people to do it.
And couldn't we use out of the CIP money to fund this?
But of
Easily.
course, easily.
But remember, there's already a tax being collected, and that tax was sufficient to pay for the continual desilting.
And which comes back to the other question. All of these taxes, we have a tax for desilting, we have a 2.5 levy for security and health. We've since found out that is a lie. That was just a prerequisite to get another loan. We have all of these taxes and all of these excess monies. We have excess money being collected on gas and all of this. Couldn't we have kept, and that's segueing a little bit, kept our minimum wage as is, drop the cost of living, so the monies that we're receiving right now, we're making, can go a longer way because we're paying less for things, less for food, less for gas, less for water, less for electricity, less for whatever. Drop the cost of living,
Yeah, but
allow
Laura,
for businesses.
You didn't need to if they had continued the plan to repair the deteriorating infrastructure. When the road,
Which was being financed.
which was being financed. So the more Wasco replaces the old pipes, the less non-revenue water it has.
So let me.
The more profitable Wasco can become.
So the water problem up north was twofold: the desilting, or the siltation, and particularly blocking the lower valve. The second one that Dominic is making reference to, very importantly, the water goes in a pipe to Cicero, and there it goes into a water treatment. That water treatment's expensive because it's electricity driven, okay? And you have to go through this process to clean the water. That water then is piped up north. It's estimated that we're losing 60% of that water. Now that's very expensive because that's processed water that year. So remember when we did the Rodney Bay Road, when we went to dig up the road, we found out that the pipes were horrible. So look, if I wanted to be expedient, we could have just covered up and had the road finished. We said no.
Because it'll cost you more in the long run.
Well, we did the right thing. In the middle of COVID, we had to go and find the pipes. Factories have been closed down. Okay, I can't even remember where they found the pipes, but they had to bring the pipes in. We had to wait for them to be shipped down here. Okay, and then the road can continue. But the pipe was done. So when solutions hear about a program called smart metering, what smart metering does, it puts a meter at one section of a pipe, and then puts another meter at another section of the pipe. So you see how much water is coming into the pipe, and you see how much water is going out of the pipe. And you continuously go down to figure out which are the broken pipes. That's how it's done. 60% of our water is being lost.
That's a lot of water.
And it's water that we've already paid.
Yes, it's
to be
treated water.
processed.
Electricity.
So the first part, I felt as Prime Minister that I would have liked to have seen the treated water done first. This was in a well in advanced stage. The Labour Party were instrumental in getting CDB. CDB put it out to tender to see what the solutions were. The silt trap solution was the one that was chosen. I remember them coming into cabinet, and we sat there with the greatest amount of skepticism, because again, you know, the Labour Party were the ones behind it, and CDB were able to convince us, no, this was well thought out, this is a good plan, right?
But he's being modest, Laura. I must compliment my political leader. When WASCO came with a desilting plan, and it was going to cost, I don't know if you remember this, but it was going to cost as much as it cost to build a dam, to desilt the dam. And he said, gentlemen, have you all looked at desilting? Have you all looked at how we can augment our water supply with desalination plants? We're surrounded by an island of water. So go back, do your assessment, tell me what the costs are, and then come back to us.
Oh, so that's
And
why
so that
WASCO
is-
called us about about desalination.
Yeah. So he was very hard on WASCO to do the research to make the right decision, and that paid off for WASCO, because every single year WASCO was profitable, and having done all those projects island-wide. Look at the Dennery Water Project, look at the Viewfort North, Viewfort South, Canaries,
Mico.
Buto to Belvedere, Mico
Laborn.
Water Project, Laborn Water Project. Now Spider is very proud of the Laborn Water Project.
Well, the
because
people up there cried.
in the cabinet that you served with Spider that I was too young to be part of.
I know there's a compliment somewhere.
He brought water to
Laborn.
Laborn, and it was one of the last communities. So UWP has always made water a priority.
Always.
UWP has made progress and development a priority.
Yeah.
Don't take that away from yourself. Progress and development, it's not just water, and water just happens to have benefited from that, water being life. But gentlemen, we are out of time. We are completely out of time, and I'm glad we ended on water being the last thing that we talked about, because water is life, and we could go on and on and on when it comes to water. I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank you so much for explaining so that every common person can understand what we are facing when we keep talking about the CIP and the scandals and how it affects us, and why we should care, and why we should not allow politicians to brush it aside. And I know when you go into the House, they're going to tell you, forget about that, Sasha Passé, you know, that has passed, forget about it. The usual suspects are going to say that, but no, we cannot. We were told. We just didn't know what we were hearing. Friends, family, and foreigners. And I'm going to end the way we started, the way I started, and that is to say, oh, what a tangle web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Until next time, adieu.